All right, so a little bit of breaking news. We've got Scott Fitterer out as general manager of the Carolina Panthers. I saw this show up on if my phone wants to cooperate, I can actually pull this up on my phone, as it is Black Monday in the NFL and people are going to be start to get let go and all that fun stuff. But yeah, this is from David Newton over at ESPN. General manager Scott Fitterer fired, leaving assistant general manager Dan Morgan in charge of the day-to-day operations for the time being. There is a push. I was talking to some Panthers folks about this. There is a push for Dan Morgan to be the next general manager of the Carolina Panthers. And I mean, look, we can get into the merits of whether or not Dan Morgan is it would be a good idea as a general manager of the Carolina Panthers. But I think ultimately it comes down to, well, who's your coach going to be? I think it'll signify what kind of coach the Panthers are going for, like the Jim Harbaugh. If there's a GM hiring before a coach, or these things kind of come together. I think this is all very important with the kind of coach they're going to try to get next, because you and I have talked about this. In the next logical step for the David Tepper growth trajectory as an owner, he needs to. Yeah. All right, I got the hot young shot, the hot shot in Matt Rule, overpaid. Needed to be fired. Moving on. All right, I'm going to get adults in the room, football guys. Okay, well, I picked the wrong ones. Now I just need to give it all to somebody to do.
And I'll be fair to Scott Fitterer. I don't think he made any of those choices when Matt Rule was the coach. I thought Matt Rule was the one really pushing the buttons and pulling the levers on their roster decisions. I don't really know what he did this past year with Frank Reich. Like, I think that was more of a David Tepper, let's go trade for Bryce Young. Let's go get Bryce Young. I think that was him. Mm-hmm. So in fairness to him, I'm not sure he ever really had the final say or it was his choice what was going on over there. But obviously the decisions that were made while he was the general manager were not good enough. And the failure at the top of the draft for the last 4 years has been evident for the Carolina Panthers. All you have to do is look at what the Houston Texans did this year. And I tweeted this and people were like, people were like a little bit rankled. I wasn't reducing it to CJ Stroud versus Bryce Young.
Yeah, well,
it was in 18 of the last 20 years, a team has gone from worst in its division to first, which the Texans now become 19 and 21 years. Yeah, they've made other smart moves. Please don't get me wrong. But Joe, I remember distinctly you and I being on the air talking to Bomani Jones, Houston native, and talking about, hey, does anybody want to work for this owner? Because Deshaun Watson didn't want to play for them. And the coach, they fired Bill O'Brien and they kept running through one and done coaches. And people not realizing in the NFL, it doesn't take that much. And stop with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. They're not the Marx brothers. They're not Jerry Rice and John Taylor. They're good players. And you can find good players in the draft, but you have to be smart enough to go and get them. And also you have to make the right move at the top of the draft, which they obviously did in CJ Stroud and Bryce and Will Anderson. But it's not that far off for the Panthers, I guess, is what my point is here.
So here's the issue with the Carolina Panthers and why there isn't a lot of optimism. And yes, David Tepper is a big reason why there's not a lot of optimism. Last week, when everybody was losing their minds over the water toss, it was coming out that, the problem that David Tepper has is that anybody that would have told David Tepper no, anybody that would have told David Tepper, hey, man, maybe we need to do things a little bit differently. Maybe this is something that you should not be involved in. They're all gone. They all left. Either he fired them or they left on their own. And that's where the Dan Snyder analogy comes in. They can say all the right things. I'm a patient man. I'm going to stay out of the way. I'm going to let my football people do things. But you can't help yourself. You can't help yourself. And the greatest accomplishment David Tepper has managed to pull off in owning this team has actually been not Messi coming to Charlotte, not bringing music to Charlotte. It's the fact that people in Charlotte are going, all those bad things we said about Michael Jordan? Maybe he wasn't good at being the owner of the Hornets. Maybe he was a little cheap, but he wasn't incompetent. That's a problem. And the Panthers have hit a point where it is more than being 2 years away from being 2 years away. Because what do we know about this area? And we've seen it with the Carolina Hurricanes. When you hit a rock bottom,
people tune out.
They are done with you. Yeah. And it takes not just 1 year, not just 2 years. It takes a couple of years of sustained winning to bring people back in the fold. Now,
I think the NFL is different than
not in that town, dude. Not in Charlotte. Not in Charlotte.
You don't think if they start 5-0
Nope.
that people won't be running back there?
No, they won't. They won't.
I do.
I disagree.
Yeah.
Because I think ultimately they're going to associate all this stuff with David Tepper. And David Tepper is going to do something that keeps people away. They might get more people in the building, but who's to say they're actual Panthers fans? So that's where the Panthers are right now. And I don't see this being turned around any quicker, because here's the other thing. We know the draft order.
I think they have $37 million in cap room as well.
They do. They get like 21 free agents or something like that. Something crazy like that.
So hopefully they can, like I said, it doesn't take that much.
We'll see, man. We'll see.